He was standing at his mother's grave when his girlfriend was in their bed with another man. But that's not where this story gets interesting. What Marcus did next was something nobody saw coming. Not his girlfriend. Not her mother. And certainly not the guy who thought he'd gotten away with it. Let me take you back to the beginning. Marcus and Elena had been together for 3 years. They met at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, one of those random Tuesday mornings where you're not looking for anything, and somehow everything finds you. She spilled her latte on his laptop. He laughed instead of getting angry. She offered to buy him a new one. He said he'd settle for her number instead. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Within a year, they moved in together. A small one-bedroom apartment in Queens, technically only approved for one tenant, so Elena had to pretend she was just a girlfriend who visited often. They didn't care. They were building something. Or at least, Marcus thought they were. The first 2 years were everything you'd expect from a couple that fell hard and fast. Inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. Lazy Sunday mornings where neither of them wanted to get out of bed. The kind of love that makes you believe all those songs on the radio were written specifically about you. But somewhere around year 3, things started to shift. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming match, no thrown plates, no slammed doors. It was quieter than that. Elena started coming home later. She picked up her phone faster. She laughed less at his jokes and more at texts from people he'd never heard of. Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed. But he told himself what every person in love tells themselves, that he was overthinking it. That couples go through phases. That she was just stressed at work. Then his uncle died. It was sudden. A heart attack on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus booked a flight to Ohio that same night. He asked Elena to come with him. She said she couldn't, something about a deadline at work that couldn't be moved. He understood. Or at least, he said he did. The funeral was on a Saturday. Marcus stood in a cemetery surrounded by family members he hadn't seen in years, watching a man who had taught him how to ride a bike get lowered into the ground. He cried. He called Elena afterward, needing to hear her voice. She didn't pick up. He called again an hour later. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding out of breath, and told him she'd been at the gym. It was 11:30 at night. Marcus flew home on Sunday. When he walked through the door, the apartment felt different. Nothing was out of place, not exactly, but there was a charge in the air, the kind of electricity that lingers after something has happened in a space. The bedroom smelled like cologne. Not his cologne. Elena greeted him with a hug that lasted a beat too long, the kind of hug that's trying to compensate for something. She asked about the funeral. She said she missed him. She made dinner. Everything was normal. Everything was wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena became distant in a way that was almost clinical. She stopped initiating any kind of physical contact. She started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, as close to the wall as she could get without falling off. When Marcus reached for her, she said she wasn't feeling well. When he tried to talk about it, she said he was being paranoid. Then one night, she fell asleep with her phone unlocked on the couch. Marcus wasn't the type to snoop. He'd always believed that if you go looking for problems, you'll find them even where they don't exist. But something in his gut, that same gut feeling that had been whispering to him for weeks, made him pick up that phone. What he found destroyed him. The messages were from someone named Tyler. They went back 4 months. 4 months of conversations that started flirty and escalated into something that made Marcus feel like the walls were closing in. Photos. Plans. Details about what they'd done while Marcus was in Ohio burying his uncle. Tyler had been in their apartment. In their bed. While Marcus was standing in a cemetery, crying over a man he loved, Elena was with someone else in the home they'd built together. Marcus put the phone down exactly where he found it. He went to the bathroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bathtub for 45 minutes. He didn't cry. He didn't punch the wall. He just sat there. Processing. Planning. Because here's the thing about Marcus, he wasn't the type to explode. He was the type to think. And what he thought of over the next 3 days was something far more devastating than any screaming match could ever be. He didn't confront Elena. He went to work. He came home. He smiled. He cooked dinner. He acted like absolutely nothing had changed. And Elena, who had clearly been bracing herself for a confrontation that never came, slowly relaxed. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She had no idea what was coming. On Thursday morning, Marcus took the day off work. He told Elena he had an early meeting. The moment she left for her job, he began. He started with the closet. Every dress, every jacket, every pair of shoes that belonged to her, folded neatly and placed into boxes. Then the bathroom. Her shampoo, her makeup, her collection of skincare products that took up 3 shelves. All of it, carefully packed. Not thrown. Not crammed. Packed with the kind of care you'd give to someone's belongings if you still loved them but knew it was over. Then came the harder things. The photo of them at Coney Island. The birthday card she'd made him by hand. The playlist she'd burned onto an actual CD because she thought it was romantic. He put all of it into a separate, smaller box. He labeled it memories. By noon, every trace of Elena was packed into 4 boxes stacked neatly by the front door. But Marcus didn't stop there. He drove to Elena's mother's house. Linda. A sweet woman in her late 50s who had always treated Marcus like the son she never had. She made him pierogi every time he visited and called him my boy. Marcus had only met her a handful of times, but each visit left him feeling like he'd gained a second family. He pulled up to her house with the boxes in his trunk. When Linda opened the door, her face lit up the way it always did when she saw him. Marcus. What a surprise. Is Elena with you? He smiled. But it wasn't his usual smile. It was the kind of smile that holds back an ocean. No, Linda. It's just me. I wanted to bring these by. He gestured to the boxes. These are Elena's things. Linda's expression shifted from joy to confusion. Her things? What do you mean? I don't think I'll be seeing Elena anymore. I wanted to make sure she got her belongings back safely, and I didn't trust leaving them outside our apartment. Linda's hand went to her chest. Marcus, what happened? Did you two have a fight? This was the moment. The moment where Marcus could have told her everything. He could have said her daughter was a cheater. He could have pulled out his phone and shown her the screenshots he'd taken. He could have torn Elena's reputation apart right there on her mother's doorstep. But he didn't. Instead, his eyes filled with tears, real, unforced tears, and he said, I'm sorry it didn't work out. You've been so kind to me. I'm sorry. Linda stared at him. She knew. Maybe not the details, but a mother always knows when something is deeply wrong. She pulled him into a hug, and Marcus broke. He sobbed into the shoulder of a woman who was about to lose a son she'd never officially had, and she held him like he was her own. He pulled away after a minute, wiped his eyes, and carried the boxes inside for her. He placed them in the living room, one by one. Then he turned to Linda, thanked her for everything, and walked out the door. He didn't look back. By the time Elena came home from work that evening, the apartment was half empty. Her side of the closet was bare. Her toothbrush was gone. Every trace of her existence in that space had been surgically removed. She called Marcus 17 times. He answered on the 18th. Where is all my stuff? What did you do? Your things are at your mom's. All of them. I packed everything carefully. Silence. You went to my mom's? I did. What did you tell her? Another pause. This one longer. Nothing, Elena. I didn't tell her anything. I didn't have to. And that was it. That was the revenge. Not a screaming match. Not a public humiliation. Not a dramatic confrontation. Marcus simply left. Quietly. With dignity. And in doing so, he achieved something far more powerful than any act of anger ever could. Because Elena now had to go to her mother's house. She had to look Linda in the eye. She had to explain why this kind, gentle man who brought her belongings back with tears in his eyes no longer wanted to be with her. She had to answer questions she couldn't answer without exposing herself. And the worst part? Marcus never said a single bad word about her. Not to Linda. Not to their friends. Not to anyone. He simply disappeared from her life, and every person who asked what happened was met with the same quiet response, it just didn't work out. But everyone knew. When a good man walks away in silence, people don't blame him. They look at the person who stayed and wonder what they did to lose someone like that. Elena called Marcus for weeks afterward. The calls went from angry to confused to desperate to pleading. He never answered again. Not once. 6 months later, Marcus ran into Linda at a grocery store. She hugged him so tight he thought his ribs would crack. I know what she did, Linda whispered. I am so sorry, my boy. Marcus just smiled, that same ocean-holding smile, and said, take care of yourself, Linda. He walked away. And this time, he didn't just not look back. He didn't need to. Sometimes the loudest thing a person can do is say nothing at all. Sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't revenge at all, it's simply choosing yourself, walking away with your head held high, and letting the silence speak louder than any words ever could. Marcus never looked for Elena online. He never asked mutual friends about her. He closed that chapter completely, as if she'd never existed. And in doing so, he didn't just move on. He won.